Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, attorney Sonia Madison. How you doing, Sonia?
The rain is slowly stopping a little bit. I don't know how it's going over there. I heard you guys had tornado warnings last weekend, but it has just been a lot of rain here.
If we've had them, I missed them. Actually, no, it was one night last Sunday, I think it was. Storms came through. It was horrible, but only for about 10 minutes. And then after that, my dog went a little crazy after that point, peed in the house. I'm like, why do we even have a dog? Why?
Hey, I would
Won't
ask
be
that
much
same
longer.
question. Not any offense to the dog lovers out there,
No offense, but
but
she's getting old, and so won't be long to be with us here. Your hair looks like it's growing.
Oh, I actually cut it up some because it's my
Did
aunt's.
you?
Yeah, but yeah, well, I appreciate it.
It
I
looks,
have
well,
more.
that wasn't a compliment. I just said, let me get to the compliment first. Okay. It looks nice, Sonia. Now you can thank me.
This has been my birthday week, so I've just been taking all in all the love, however it
Yeah,
comes.
I know. I'm sorry that we couldn't make it down to the party because we had relatives in town, and so we couldn't come down around that time. People were planning to come in town. Other relatives, I should say.
I was gonna say for
But
those listening are like, well, I didn't get invited either. It was small gathering. It was,
listen, I didn't even get invited, and I'm her favorite.
but anyways, how you been?
I am enjoying this new phase of my life. I was talking to someone in the operating room this past maybe yesterday it was, I guess. And I was just we were just having a catching up on things. And I'm like, this is the first time this ever happened. This is the first time I've ever done this. And I look over the past 5 years, I've had a lot of firsts. And some of which I won't care to share, but they say confession is good for the soul, but bad for the reputation. But no, it's just nothing harmful though. So, but the point is that I find myself at this age in life doing new things, finding new things, enjoying new things that I have never done before. Like going to the movies by myself was one of the examples. I've never done that. I can't believe that I'm 55 years old and I don't ever remember going to the movies by myself, which was a weird thing, because
It
I'm
is.
like,
I've
and
done
so I watched,
it, and I'm 30.
so right. Yeah. Now that's a weird thing that you would actually believe and expect us to believe that, but okay. Um, I know people have a hard time believing that I'm actually 55. They're like, "Oh my God, you're fit. Shut up. I thought you were about 38." I was like, "Yeah, I know. I get it all the
You're
time."
listening. Please comment so we know who these people are.
But it was weird. I watched the movie. The movie that I watched, I didn't too particularly care for. And unfortunately, it was one that was getting really rave reviews. Matter of fact, I'm going out and say it. It was Sinners.
I was gonna
I
say that
didn't
was
really
what I was
care for the movie.
guessing.
Yeah, I didn't care for it. As I was sitting watching the movie, I said, "Is it that you don't like it because you're here by yourself, or is it that you don't like it because the storyline was stupid?" I thought, and I think I concluded that the story. I think the storyline could have been a lot better. The problem that I have with it is that I think it was lazy to resort to vampires as the source of evil in the movie. I think they could have had a little less common, less stereotypical um, evil spirit, make it something that's not tangible, but something that's present that draws people into it and steal their soul. But to go to vampires, come on, really? To me, I thought it was weak.
I haven't seen it, so I cannot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oops.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. No, but I don't think there's
And
any.
a friend of mine told me that she thinks there might be, and then you could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but she thinks there might be like voodoo and magic and stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'm just not gonna touch it. But like you said, it's gotten a lot of great reviews, and so, um, but to each his own. Not
I
everyone's.
know people say that as Christians we shouldn't be watching that kind of stuff, but I mean, I think at some point you just really have to figure out these things exist in the world. And so, I mean,
Vampires
to
are out
say,
there.
now, evil exists in the world,
Okay. Okay.
and evil spirits exist in the world. And I don't think that we can always shield ourselves from these things. And there's a lot of things that people don't like to see around the world that's ugly. And Jesus gave the most, I think, poignant example of how we should not shield ourselves necessarily from the evil that's around us. We must see it. When he hung on the cross, he was the embodiment of sin, the embodiment of evil, because it all bore upon him at that time. And then he looked over to his mother, of all people, to his mother, and said, "Woman, behold your son." And if you can imagine the horror of a mother having to look at their child beaten beyond recognition, where they couldn't even tell that he was even human for that matter, and then say, "Look at me." I think Jesus in that moment was saying, "Hey, you need to be able to open your eyes and see the evil that's in this world. And not necessarily just stick your head in the sand and avoid." I'm not saying get out there and enjoy it. I'm just
I
saying
was gonna
embrace
say, I think
it,
there is a
embellish
thin
it.
line between going towards it and accepting it when it's,
Yeah.
you know, in front of you. Because it's kind of like those lynchings, how, you know, people were using it as an opportunity to have picnics and parties. I mean, I don't want them to come back, well, you know, evil in the world, we gotta watch it. No, no, no. Let's not be entertained by the evil. But at the
Yeah.
same time, let's not act as if it does not exist. I'm with you on that.
Well, thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable Consult. Quickly, we've achieved a point of agreement. Sonia and I, this really happens, but
Although you
okay.
went and paid for some evil entertainment, but nonetheless, what do you think about these
It really
pardons?
wasn't
Because
entertaining, frankly, as
speaking
far
of
as I'm concerned.
evil, if you consider breaking the law evil, what do you think about some of these pardons that Trump has? We've got Todd and Chrisley, who you know are reality TV stars. Larry Hoover, who was part of the gangster disciples up in Chicago, many deaths. I think he Michael Ray Harris was part of conspiracy theory to possess and intent to distribute cocaine. We've got James Kernan, knowing and willingly permitted a felon to be engaged in the business of insurance. We've got Michael Grimm, who was aided and assisted in preparation of false and fraudulent tax returns. Go on, because I think this week alone it's been up to almost 20 pardons and eight or so commutations. So, what are your thoughts?
First thought is that a commenter, a viewer said, "Mark, you still look young." Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, next thing we want to do is, you wanted to make a comment, how young was?
Don't
Because
push it.
Sonya will.
Yeah, no, don't push it.
Because some
Give a
people will
person
say
an
that
inch.
55 still is young. So, but here's the deal about the pardons. I don't know. There is a pattern to some of them. And certainly, if you're rich, you're convicted of committing a rich person crime, or if you get convicted of committing a crime similar to that which Donald Trump has done, or if you're convicted of committing a crime basically for Donald Trump, you're going to get pardoned. It seems like you're capable and you meet the criteria for it. But then there are these other ones that you kind of hard to see what's the rationale behind it and where. And I think Trump does some things just because he can. I think in this moment he realizes, hey, listen, I'm the most powerful person in the world. I want to do something just because I can, and I want to pick with and sometimes get people, get the left media up in an uproar, get them talking about something, and distract it from other things that are newsworthy as well. People have speculated that he may actually throw a pardon P Diddy's way.
Well, he was asked, and I think
Yeah.
initially he said, "Well, I mean, we used to be friends, but you know, when I started getting into politics, he kind of distanced himself a little bit." What's so interesting is when you look at, we talk, of course, about Todd Chrisley, another guy, I think his name is Lawrence Duran. We're looking at almost $100 million in restitution that they were owed to the United States government that's now being wiped away. I mean, do we not need this money? You know, I mean, we've been talking about, Doge and government waste and all this, and this was an opportunity to get some money back that was owed because some of that was tax fraud, some of that was dealing with healthcare fraud and the like. And now you're saying, "Oh, I'm going to pardon you, don't owe this restitution." So, do we need the money or not? I mean, yeah, but just like you can't have it both ways. But I do agree with you. It does make me wonder, what is it that we're missing because you threw this my way so that I would turn my head to the right. But then am I missing something on the left that you don't want me to see? But nonetheless, it's still disheartening that this is what's happening.
Yeah, it's evident to me that his priority is not the American people. And it's it isn't. It really isn't. It's his priority is that which can benefit him in the short term, long term, whatever. And he realizes this is likely his last time being president, so he needs to set up um, situations where, in the future he can benefit from it. There's actually a parable in the Bible that talks about that. It talks about the evil servant or the wicked servant, the one who had squandered all of his master's money, and then when the master asked him to give an accounting for it, he realized that his job was in jeopardy, and so instead what he did was went out to all of the other people who owed his master the money. And he said, "How much do you owe me?" They said, "You owe me 50 shekels." And then he's like, "Well, give me 25 and we'll call you debt wipe clean." And he did that with several other debtors. And the master came back to him and said, "You've done well." He's like, "Because you're wise, you're wiser." He said, "The children of the world are wiser than the children of light." And that what they do is they make friends with the people of the world by way of money, basically, by way of money, so that when that money fails, it will then provide some benefit for them later on. And I'm poorly paraphrasing the scripture or the parable, but I think it's like Matthew 24 or 17, one of the two, somewhere in Matthew. Just look it up. But it's interesting because people criticize, how people do things for money, but there's some value that Jesus is, or at least the scripture and God recognize that even making sure that you have some of these friends by way of money to do that, to be wise as a serpent, to do something like that. And the reason being is because money is so important for us right now, but money will fail. And it talks about, making those friends into everlasting and into eternal houses, basically what it's saying. So they can open the door. It's not the case with Trump, but they can open the door at least for some eternal benefit to other people. I
Well,
don't know.
it's funny that you mentioned pay because, we've got this lawsuit against 60 Minutes or CBS that's going on, which multiple legal experts are saying is completely frivolous. For those that don't know, he's claiming there's a clip that CBS used to promote their investigation or the interview with Kamala Harris, but didn't use that clip in the actual interview. And so he's claiming that they were showing bias by not showing the clip. And if you hear both of them, which we won't show it here just because, we can't probably, even though we could argue, fair use. But anyways, neither clip really bodes well in Kamala's favor, but they're nonetheless accurate. And again, legal experts are overwhelmingly saying it's a frivolous lawsuit. They, of course, a lot of news medias have the discretion to edit as they see fit. And it didn't cost him the election. So he's almost like, well, where's your damage? Even though he's claiming, "Oh, I suffered mental anguish from watching that interview." But ultimately, what is happening is CBS wants to broker this huge merger with Paramount Plus and what was this guy? Something I can't even think of the name of the other company. And what they need is the administration to approve the merger. And so they recognize to some degree, oh, if we want to get this approval, we're essentially going to have to pay this settlement. Now, I appreciate, I think Senator Warren and perhaps some others are saying, hey, we're going to challenge this because to me, it seems like a bribe versus, a settlement, which I think that's a good argument. I mean, again, there's no basis in this lawsuit And if you're paying him out just for the purpose of a favor, I can see the argument that that is a bribe. But like you said, Trump is definitely using his position to get paid. And it is, I mean, again, we laugh to keep from crying because it is the worst imaginable when it comes to a government position like this. And there's no checks and balances for it.
Do you think that we're overreacting? Because you start looking at some of the things that the people on the right see, and they're like, "Oh my God, that was atrocious, and that was the worst thing that could ever have happened." And then we look at the thing on the that he's doing on the right, on the other side, and we say the exact same thing. But people on his side don't necessarily see it that way. They always have an excuse. Then they'll say the
I'm
same
not
thing about
sure if
people on
they
the
don't
other
see
side
it
of the
that way.
argument. Nah.
I'm not sure if they don't see that because again, that tax bill that came down, a lot of Republicans did not like it. And again, you're increasing the deficit, you're cutting Medicaid costs. I mean, they have acknowledged that they're hoping Senate Republicans will gut it a little bit. And so to me, that you're also appalled, even with that jet. A lot of Republicans said, nah, that's crossing the line. There are times to Hamas. And now Qatar is coming out saying, hey, we didn't initiate giving the jet. It came to us by the US government. And so I do think that they see some of this as, man, if Obama did it, yes, we'd be raising all kinds of hell and going off, but he's doing it. We're gonna let him do this because he has a base that's been supportive.
Yeah. So I think the question comes down, what would you do for money? And that question has been asked over and over, money and power, but eventually it all boils down to money. You got CBS getting ready to, as you said, try to settle. I wonder if the courts can actually reject that settlement, much like they did Hunter Biden's settlement. Um, but then those are the courts that would be under federal jurisdiction, I presume. But we see them settling for money. We see Republican senators and congressmen settling and seeing that something is outright wrong, and then they say, "Okay, well, we're going to let him go ahead and get the jet." And the Pentagon saying, "We're going to go ahead and let him get the jet." Why? Because he's Donald Trump, and we want to continue to curry favor. It's not just that they love Donald Trump like that. There's an inherent benefit that they get from it, and it eventually boils down to power and money. We see the same thing happening with the senators, with the congressmen about passing the big beautiful bill. The only one who really had enough courage to actually say something about it was Elon Musk, was to say that he thinks that it's a dumb thing to do.
It can't
That
be
nothing
big
can
and
be
beautiful,
and
right?
beautiful. It's got to be one or the other. Which I find myself agreeing with him on that. But I don't think beautiful is even in the running for it. But we see a lot of people just saying, "Hey, this is what I'll do for money." We see even the American people saying, "This is what I'll do for money as well. I can tolerate the inhumane treatment of immigrants, even though they're here illegally. Yes, send them to a war-torn zone, South Sudan. Send them over there." Because, right now they're taking up some of my money. I've had arguments and conversations with people who were lifelong Democrats who, before this election, said, "Hey, I'm voting for Donald Trump." The reason why is because we can see all these immigrants now getting money that we can't even get black people to get. Do you realize that they're not going to get it? You're not going to get it once it
I
comes
was
through
gonna
anyway.
say, did you see DEI rolled?
Right? You're
You
not
know
going to
what
get it either way.
to
But there's a lot of things we're sacrificing humanity for the sake of money, and it's just an overarching theme that we see occurring recurrently throughout the public discourse right now, where the thing that matters most is money. It's the economy, stupid, and this is not a new thing. Uh, James Corville said that thing like what 4 decades ago or 3 or 4 decades ago. And it's all about the dollar. It's all about the almighty dollar. And question then is, what are you willing to compromise for it? And, heck, I sold my business for it. So,
Well, I was going to say there's a difference between, oh, it's about money and, oh, it's about the economy. Because to me, economists made it very clear that if you elect Donald Trump, it is going to pretty much ruin our economy tenfold. And I will say this over and over. The hatred for immigrants, the hatred for minorities was so steep that they didn't care that the economy would suffer. And we're also seeing, I mean, again, I appreciate Harvard stepping up. I think the president did a commencement speech and got a whole minute of a standing ovation. But he's trying to remove the citizens or the visas for student visas for pretty much every Chinese person. I mean, and you talk to the Republican pundits and they're like, oh, I mean, we're just talking about the ones that are overly saying, things against the government and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't think any of them are saying anything. What you want to do is round them all up and take them back to China. And that is going to hurt, I guess, us economically wise. I mean, when you look at some of the innovations that are coming, I mean, AI is coming. We need around global assistance to be able to keep up. As we see with these tariffs, you're not going to stop companies from using global parts to be able to keep up with the technology that is globally happening in the advancement. And so all you're doing is charging consumers even more. But if you're then taking the help that could at least try to build some of that here, and you're saying, no, we don't want any immigrants, well, then you're putting us in a much worse spot. And we're also seeing, I think it was King Charles, that we've seen UK people going to create allyship with Canada, create allyship with China while we're continuing the discourse. We're going to be left behind. So I just think there's a difference between saying, oh, I'm worried about my own pocket versus I'm worried about the economy. Because if you're worried about the economy, you recognize we're getting worse.
Well, I think people in common discourse equates those, make those synonymous. If the economy's doing well, then I'm doing well. That's where they start thinking I'm going to have more opportunity. I'm going to have more money if the economy is well. Because people voted, overwhelmingly in favor for Donald Trump based off of the economy. You
No,
know,
you
they
keep saying it's of the economy. I'm saying, no, no, no. It was their hatred for immigrants and their hatred for minorities that had them
well,
voting.
the exit polls
I mean, are people
says
going to
it
be
was for
honest
the
and say, I
economy.
voted for him because I'm a racist? Are you going to create
The
something that
racists
doesn't make
will.
you look like a racist?
They're anonymous polls. They're anonymous polls. And
Still.
and trust me, there were enough black men that I talked to and say, I'm not voting for a black woman,
But to me, the
which
black
is a
men I
bad
want just didn't
situation.
vote. I mean, and again, I don't think that's any better. Don't get me wrong. But I think there was still an acknowledgement that, hey, I recognize this guy is racist. I just don't want to vote for a woman. And, that's unfortunate because you're voting against your interests. But, if that's where you're going, that's where you're going. But
Well,
again, you're giving too much credit. I'm like, no, it's not about the economy. Economists told you which one was the better candidate, and you still went with the one that they did not recommend.
one of our viewers brought up this whole notion about the nickname Taco. You're familiar with that? Trump always chickens out. That whole
Yeah,
discussion.
I,
Uh,
I heard he went off on a reporter for asking about it.
But I mean, I'll tell you what makes him chicken out is when he starts finding out that it's going to cause some economic harm to him or his buddies or the people, and eventually boils down still to his money, and it all boils down to money, as far as I'm
Money,
concerned.
but not the economy.
The
Um,
OJs said it. For the love of money, people will hate something, stab their own brothers or whatever. But for the love of money, I should know that song, but I'm sorry, OJs. My
you
bad.
are around that generation. Now you got to tell me about Make America Healthy Again, or your thoughts. And,
Uh,
and just so you know, what I've gathered so far is that it talks about four main causes of chronic diseases in children, 70 pages. So I know you haven't probably read through the whole thing. Ultra processed
or
food,
any of it.
environmental toxins, overprescribing of medications, sedentary and technology driven lifestyles. But then we've had at least, I guess, like several people say that a lot of these citations are actually false, they do not exist. One person who was cited in the Journal of JAMA Pediatrics said, and this is Catherine Keys, an epidemiologist at Columbia University, said that was not my research. I can confirm that I and my co-authors did not write that paper that was cited. And so then the White House, of course, rushed and replaced it with another citation. We'll see how long that lasts. But it sounds like again, it was just written to placate RFK Jr. and filled with falsities. But what are your thoughts on it?
I think in theory, it's a good idea. In execution, it's a problem. In theory, yes, we should actually look at making America healthy again. We should look at those preservatives, and there are tons of preservatives that are placed in our foods, uh, colorants and things that are unnecessary, that are actually causing, systemic inflammation and every other sequela that comes along with that from a medical standpoint. We should be looking at uh, in cleaner environments and making sure that we're getting lead out of the waters and out of school system. Was that in Wisconsin? Or I think it was Wisconsin or Minnesota. I'm sorry. I think it was Minnesota, where there's where kids are, in schools are now being tested to have higher lead levels than they should. And unfortunately, the ones who bear the brunt of much of this are the people who are poor, those people who are already disadvantaged. And then you add on top of that, poor health, that just makes that whole population even poorer. So the challenge that we're going to have with some of these things is that those preservatives and colorants are in our foods, for example, right now for a reason. Why? Because Americans demand it. Americans want their food, their bread to sit on the shelf and last for 3 weeks, as opposed to, being have to be consumed in less than a week. Otherwise, it goes bad. And so when you start realizing that some of these preservatives are in there so that you could extend the life of the food, and when they're no longer in there, food spoils a lot faster. You start saying, wait a minute, I'm spending more money on groceries, and it's not lasting longer. And I find myself throwing out more groceries than I consumed before. So the question then comes, are you willing to pay for better health? And and hopefully, for a lot of people, that's just not going to happen, unfortunately. But hopefully, for the vast majority of us in America, we'll have to find out and see what happens after that. It's always been costly to eat healthy. I mean, you start looking at organic foods. Organic foods just cost a lot more. The reason why is because they last a lot less. And that whole concept of spending more to get less is not an American concept. So.
Well, and don't be fooled because your definition of organic may not satisfy the government definition, meaning the government is a lot more liberal, or I should say liberal, broad than what your definition of organic may be. Now, I did hear that he recommended pregnant women not get the vaccine, COVID vaccine. I mean, are you would
Well,
agree?
I don't know that he recommended. He just lifted the recommendation for it. The CDC previously recommended young children and pregnant women get the COVID vaccine because it was shown to help reduce the morbidity and mortality in those patient groups. Well, they've now decided that the CDC is no longer going to make that recommendation. And in fact, it was against, I think, the American College of Obstetrics, their recommendation. They're like, we still recommend it. And in fact, they lifted it without even consulting the obstetricians and the pediatricians who actually made these recommendations in the first place. And he had two other doctors that joined him, I think, in his press conference. But you're like, what do you do? Is you just disregard the opinions of the experts, and that's where we're going right now. Who cares what the expert says anymore? This is what we believe is going to be right, and this is the way it is. And that's the new Trump America. That's Trump's America right now.
And we define RFK Jr. as an expert, and so that just already tells you what you need to know.
He said, "Don't listen to him. Don't take his advice." He said, "Don't take his medical advice."
While simultaneously writing a report filled with a whole bunch of citations that aren't true. So finally, I want to talk about Diddy before we move to the topic because we got to stay up to date on this trial. And I know a lot of people are into it.
We have to. We
We have
must.
to. We must. We had the an assistant Clark who testified, and she talked about how not only Diddy came to her house and said, "Let's go. We're about to go kill Kid Cudi," and then subsequently, I think they blew up his car or at least attempted to. And she called,
Allegedly.
yeah, intended to called Cassie on a burner phone and let her know, hey, we're at Kid Cudi's house. Kid Cudi heard her in the background and then raced over there. They saw him, taste out, but Puff also grabbed her phone because it was a burner phone that she was calling Cassie on, and then subsequently called Cassie back. And she talked also about times where he would tell her, go get Cassie, and then she would actually go get her and then watch him beat her up and just corroborated a lot of stuff that she was saying in terms of the abuse that was happening. And again, we're talking about a racketeering case. So the idea that what they're trying to show is that he's using this business to essentially, you know, be to have sexual intercourse with women. So we had her take the stand. What was interesting about her testimony also was, of course, the defense came in and they showed some text messages about her, saying, hey, I guess he recommended her for something or speaking to some degree positive. And she let them know, first of all, that wasn't a 2021, that was back in 2012 when we had a settlement agreement. I wrote the recommendation letter pursuant to the settlement agreement that we, engaged in. And so the signature isn't from Diddy. I mean, the signature is from Diddy, but the words are not from Diddy. I actually wrote it. And she also just went into detail about how she tried to leave multiple times. And when she did leave, he made it very difficult for her to find subsequent employment. And in fact, she testified that one potential employer told her, you got to leave this Diddy stuff alone. Because I think she was considering pursuing some civil action against him, or at least speaking out about some of the things he was doing. And once that potential employer said that again, they're using that to show this enterprise that's happening. So we had her testify. We had a stylist testify about some of the markings and the like that was on Cassie. If you had one of the male sex workers testify, and he subsequently did an interview on CNN saying, I just want to apologize to her. I didn't realize any of this might have been coerced. But granted, he took the stand was probably a little bit more helpful for the defense because again, he talked about
Well,
how
by the prosecution.
she
Called by the prosecution as well.
yes, called, but fairly helpful because he said I had no clue this was not something she wanted to do. I never only person I talked to was her, and every now and then Diddy may have made some direction, but for the most part, she seemed to be in control. But
And
then
she gave him the money.
yeah, yeah, it gave the
Yeah.
money. And then you have this last one who is another ex-assistant going by the pseudonym Mia. And it's kind of interesting. I wonder if she gets the pseudonym just because we really don't know who she is, whereas everyone else maybe we could probably figure out. So it's no point in doing a disguise. But anyway, she gets a pseudonym Mia, and she talks about she previously worked with Georgina Chapman and Mike Myers, and then came to work with Diddy. She said, I came to New York, put a mattress on my car, drove here, and it was pretty much all I had. And so once I started that, it just meant so much. And of course, she talked about some of the sexual assault that was happening during his employ. She said she stayed with him multiple times, a 24-hour a day job. Mentioned at least one time she woke up and he was on top of her, telling her to be quiet, and proceeded to rape her. So of course is crying endlessly on the stand. And the defense, which I'm kind of wondering at this point, to argue that but you stayed does not negate that you were raped. And I think it may be, I don't know if men see it that way, if they see it, oh, well, you didn't care. But to me, just because I stay in an employ doesn't negate that I was raped. But anyways, feel like that's what the defense is trying to say was like, well, you did stay. As well as
Just stayed, but you also made some very favorable
yeah,
comments
made some
toward him
text
and about
messages
him afterwards. So,
on social media. And of course, she came back and said, that was my job. That was what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to make him look good. When they hired me, it was all about keeping his reputation up and the like. Um, but but again, it's interesting when again, like if I say no, does it negate it just because I stayed or because I even speak positively about you in other areas? It's kind of like the Bill Cosby situation. I mean, we people will still talk about how great of a guy he was, but that doesn't mean he didn't commit some, disturbing acts.
yeah,
And
it's one thing for other people to say nice things about you, but it's a whole other story for you to say something nice about somebody who you
about your
view
employer,
as somebody who you view as your rapist.
but you also view as your employer.
I don't care
I do care,
if
but
my
that's what I'm saying. I
employer
do
if my
care.
employer raped me. I'm no longer going to be employed by that person.
but if someone
I'm getting out of
chooses to
there. That's
stay,
stupidity to
you
me. I'm
would.
sorry. It's stupidity.
But you
It's
would. But if someone chooses to stay, that doesn't mean that they weren't raped.
it challenges their credibility.
I don't think it just,
And rightfully
no,
so.
I don't think.
Rightfully so. It should challenge your credibility because it strains credulity to actually think that you're going to, hey, I'm just going to be chumming it up with my rapist. Who does that?
People in
Nobody.
the music
People
industry,
do.
apparently. I mean,
People who are money hungry and who will do anything for the love of money. Those are the people who will do that. And
or
if
do
there if
anything to
there's
be able to, again, afford to eat and live and whatnot. Because she said that's, I think they, when they started it saying she put a mattress on her car and drove to New York. And then you've
and
got
she could
this
drive to
whole,
Burger King and live and eat. There are plenty of
again,
shelters for
you can
women
say
too.
that. But again, I think there's one thing to say, oh, I did it because I wanted $20 million. And it's another to say, oh, I did it because I wanted to be in this field. And this was at least able to sustain my lifestyle. Because I think even the ex-assistant Clark, she
Then there's
said,
some consent.
I don't know if it's consent on that. Again, just because I stay employed doesn't mean I wasn't raped. Like I did not consent to being raped, but
No,
I
I agree. I
consent
agree.
to
But
being
you
paid for
consent.
other services, like you're being your assistant. But I did not consent to being raped.
I pray that my daughter will never make such a
Oh,
stupid
we all do.
decision.
We all do.
I really do because it to me you cannot be credible when you're chumming it up with your rapist. That's just bottom line. You can't be credible. And if you are, then what it says to me is that you're willing to do a lot for the stability of money. And it may
You
not
can
be the
tell us
love
for
of it, it may
money.
be for the stability that the money can produce for you. But and maybe the story and the perspective is a lot different from a woman. I get that. But as a man, I will be homeless before I go to work for someone who has raped me and all the negative connotation that comes along with that. Now, there's a whole question. Okay, so was this date rape? Where you saying, okay, I would have, but at that moment I didn't want to, so then that constitutes rape because I really didn't want to at that moment. For a period of time, men were walking around the earth afraid to actually engage with a woman because if a woman said no one time, which a lot of women sometimes would do, is to say, I wanted to work for it a little bit. And he worked for it a little bit. And then eventually she's like, okay, yeah, you whooped me over. But then later on, she can claim, hey, he raped me because I told him no the first time when he tried, when
I
he
don't
made
think
an
that's the
attempt. I
biggest
told him
issue
no.
that you're trying to make that out to be, but okay.
I'm just,
I mean, but I
it
understand that's
was,
a legitimate
I will
thing.
tell you
That's
for
I'm not
men,
saying it's illegitimate. I just don't think that's a big issue. But again, I have no problem with the guy saying, I'm not even going to joke about that. If you're saying no, I am not going to push whatever you said no. And I have no
or
issue.
persuade
No persuading,
anyway.
right? No persuading.
Yeah.
And because we are in that kind of times. And I mean, we were in that kind of times before, but I mean, we certainly now, if she says no, no means no, you stop. But that's not what we're talking about here. I mean, if we're talking about she's sound asleep and wakes up and you're on top of her, there is no consent happening on that part. You can frown
There
all
may
you want
be.
to.
If
If
she
your
wakes
daughter
up and be
wakes
like,
up and the guy is
oh,
on top of you and says shush, it just starts, penetrating, that is not consent. And to some degree, I can empathize. And again, I'm not saying
okay.
that I would not teach my child to still push, scream, whatever to get out of the situation. I just empathize with that minute of, oh my gosh, what is happening? Here's my employer on top of me, telling me to be quiet, put it
Was
already
this the first time?
penetrating himself. I
Was
don't
there
know what
was
to
this their
do.
first? And I don't know the whole story, but was this their first sexual encounter and only sexual encounter?
From my recollection, this was the first that she recalled, but I could be wrong. So if you guys are
Yeah.
listening, I could be wrong. But she
I don't
did
know because
recall some others as well. But I'm just
I
still
imagine that there
saying,
are a lot of
right.
wives who have awakened in the morning with their husband on top of them.
I mean, we're not going to
And
compare your employer
just
versus
saying.
your spouse. We're not going to.
If you were already having a if you're already
But
having
even if your
an
spouse
intimate
is on
relationship
top
with
of
your
you,
employer,
if your spouse is on top of you and you don't want it to happen, by all means, do the same thing, scream, holler,
yeah,
whatever.
sure. Oh,
You know,
jeez.
I'm just saying
That'll
if you don't
stop
want
it.
to consent,
That'll stop
don't.
it.
But I'm not. I don't think the two are comparable here. But
So do you think
again,
she screamed and hollered,
my
or
she's
did she shush?
no, he shushed her, and she
Yeah.
just said that she froze, and so then it just happened. But again, I'm just saying, just because she remained employed with this person doesn't mean she wasn't raped. And the fact that now, again, we're getting multiple people say the same story. Why aren't we talking about his credibility? Why are we saying, "Oh, well, sorry, you stayed"? Okay, but there are other people saying the same story. This does that not bolster my credibility that this is going on?
It sure does. It bolsters an MO that he has, but it does not bolster the fact that that they weren't necessarily willing participants.
Oh,
Uh, the only honestly the only evidence that they have to say, well, I didn't want it to happen, was them saying I didn't want it to happen. You didn't leave, you didn't go file a police report, you didn't quit your job, you didn't scream and holler and get somebody else, you didn't tell somebody contemporaneously what was going on and how you felt about it. What's the other evidence that you have that you didn't consent for it, other than the fact that now, decades later or a decade later, you say, oh, I didn't want it to happen, but he did it anyway?
and you're going to
I have a
dismiss
problem with
the
that.
story. I
I have a
mean, most
problem with that.
people do not, and at least from my understanding, most rape victims do not report their rape. There is a level, and they did ask, why didn't you? She's like, there was a level of shame. There is a level of, man, you're still going to stay employed in that. I mean, there is so much more than just, oh, you're stupid because you didn't go report it. No, I mean, there's a lot of factors that can go into why someone doesn't report it, but that does not mean that they were not raped. And the
And one of those
expectation part.
factors could be that this person is wealthy and this person offers benefits to me that I'm
Yeah,
willing
it
to
could be that this
tolerate
could be
this
my
for.
employer. Yes, and there's a reason why sexual harassment is a crime. I mean, not a crime. Well, it is a crime, but it's a civil defense because we know there is history of quo happening, in which employers will say, unless you do X, you will not get promotions and you will not get whatever. And a lot of times when women do report it, like you can look at the Fox News, subsequently those anchors are not getting those jobs anymore. And that can factor too. It's like, man, I can report this, but then I'm X out of the industry. I've been working my butt off to get into this industry, and then
So
potential
are you
employers
willing
are
to
telling me.
compromise? Are you willing to
And if
compromise
you
your
are not, does
integrity
that then
and your
mean,
body
right? And if you're
for
not
this
willing,
career?
does that then mean you were not raped? That's all I'm saying. If you decide I don't want to
There's a
sacrifice,
saying that you can't rape the willing.
but it does
You can't
mean
rape the
that
willing.
you. No, it doesn't, because to me that doesn't mean she was a willing participant. It just means that she chose not to report it, and that's where I'm trying to cross the line. No, no, no.
I
Just
hope I'm not
because
sounding
I
like a
say
rapist, y'all.
that's what I'm like. Hold on. Just because I say doesn't mean I willingly accepted being raped. That is not where we are. And I hope we get to a point where, again, we had the whole Me Too movement. I hope we get to a point where women don't feel so, or people in general, because I know it happens to men as well, don't feel as if, man, if I report this, it compromises my whole career. But we do see, I mean, Donald Trump is a good example. We do see people that step out and say, oh, this happened, and all of a sudden they're blackballed. Monica Lewinsky, all of a sudden you cannot stay in
You
this.
deal with that. You deal with that. One of the challenges of being Christian is that at some point you're going to be blackballed because of your faith. Okay, deal with that. Deal with that. You're
It's
going
easy
to
for you
not
to
have
say. It may
everything
not be
come. It's
easy for
not easy
everyone
for
else to
anybody
say.
to say. It's not easy for anybody to do. I
Oh, you're
acknowledge
making it
that.
seem like, oh, I'm out. Hands
No.
down, not thinking about it. I am done.
Heck yeah.
And I'm
You rape
saying
me,
that
I
that
am
does
out,
not
and
work
I'm
for
going to report
everybody.
you. I am going to report you. I don't care what the consequence is. If you rape me, I am not going on social media and posting flattering words about you afterwards. I don't care if it is my job. I quit my job. I'll find something else. Maybe a week or two later, I'll be looking for another job. But how much longer did she stay employed with him after that? Because she wanted the benefit of what came with the association of Diddy. And if you want that benefit and you're willing to and you pay
You froze. Well, hopefully you weren't saying, hopefully you weren't
later
saying,
and say,
okay, you froze, but go ahead. You're back now.
yeah, I'm saying if you really want that connection with and everything that connection with Diddy brings for it, You have to ask, how much am I willing to compromise? How much am I willing to pay to do that? And not pay, but sacrifice in order to do that. And if it means my integrity, if it means my body safety, I'm not in that place where I'm going to do that. I don't want it that bad. Now, when people want it that bad, should they have to subject themselves to that? Absolutely not. And people who require that should be prosecuted. But you have to take the appropriate steps in order to bring an end to it, in order to protect the credibility of your witness. Now, if you continue on and you indulge all these things, and then later on somebody questions your credibility because you've indulged it later, don't get mad at the
You did
system.
not
Get mad
indulge
at
it. Don't
yourself.
say you indulged it. You did not indulge it.
You
And
benefited from
again,
it.
one of the reasons why I appreciate they put the ex-assistant clerk on the stand is because she did say, yes, I was trying to speak out. Yes, I was prepared to file this lawsuit. And then these subsequent employers, potential employers, told me, listen, you need to let that go or I will not hire you. And so
Take
again,
a stand. Take a stand
again,
for
it is so
something.
much easier for you to say that, and then but you're asking women, particularly this woman
I'm
who
asking
put
everybody
the
to do it,
mattress on
not just
her car.
women.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't feel like you're asking all these people that enabled him to be able to beat on this girl, to be able to rape assistants, to
They
be able
should have done something
to,
too.
you're not saying, hey, y'all
They
should
should
all be
have. They
locked
should
up or
have
whatever.
reported
You're getting
every
on her
last
because
one of
why
them.
would you stay in his employ? I mean, they all stayed. And
Every
yet
last one
you're
of them that
saying she
witnessed this
did
should have
goals.
reported. I hold them all to the same standard. Hold them all to the same
I
standard.
mean, to me, it's a higher standard. I mean, she's a clear victim, and y'all are not doing anything. And then,
Okay, we can say that.
you know,
We can say they
you're
should have
not
been
calling
held
her
to
a
a
victim.
higher
That's what
standard.
I
I
just need you to
agree.
call her a victim, though. You're not calling her a victim.
She might be a victim, but she continued to victimize herself by keeping herself in that situation.
So just be,
There are some
don't do
accountability
that.
that you have to have for staying. You
Don't
have to
blame the
take some
victim for being
accountability
raped.
for staying in a harmful
Don't
environment.
blame the
You
victim for
have to.
being raped, though. Don't blame the victim for
I don't
being
blame her for being raped. I blame her for staying in that situation.
Well, anyways, when you talk about where we go from here, because again, Diddy has been able to do this for me, and that's why we're here, is because it's the racketeering charge for sex trafficking. And so the whole
He's
idea
gonna get pardoned. Trump has got a
which
pardon.
again, if he does, you're still signaling to people that you can do this without consequence. And where does that leave people who want to be in this industry, who want to be able to do X, Y, and Z? And you're basically saying you are not welcome into this industry unless you are okay with being raped
You
repeatedly.
know, being virtuous is costly. It is costly. And I think this is a lesson that we, particularly as Christians, we have to learn and we have to resolve to the notion that being virtuous is going to cost us a lot of things. It's going to cost us opportunities, cost us reputation, cost us money, may cost us homelessness at some point or another. But we have to stand for what we believe is right. And I remember I was one of my pastors when I was posting all these things on Facebook. I had, I believe, what it was a prophetic mandate from God to be able to speak out about the hypocrisy of evangelicalism in 2015, starting then. And I was attending a church where the pastor was very much pro-Trump and everything else. And he said, "Aren't you worried about losing some friends and followers on Facebook? Aren't you worried about losing potential patients because you're speaking out?" No, if I lose them, then I lose them. But I cannot stay silent when there's something that I know that needs to be spoken. And if it costs me everything, then it just costs me everything. There's the scripture, for God I live, for God I die. And Paul said, I learned to abound, I learned to be abased, but into whatever situation I'll be content. I have to be content, and I can't be content unless I'm true to myself, true to my calling, true to my God. And anything that causes me to compromise either one of those things, I have to be able to say, okay, I got to let it go. Problem is we don't have that kind of resolve because money has too strong a hold on us as Americans. Money and power. That's all we want is money and power. And we're willing to tolerate, we're willing to compromise, we're willing to accept a whole lot of things that should not even be on the table because we want to enjoy the benefits that money and power and exposure and celebrity offers for us. It's got to stop.
I don't want you to portray these women as some kind of gold digger because, again, when we talk about the ex-assistant Clark, she had a child with Down syndrome that she needed to take care of. And if she is trying to get other jobs and they're all saying, no, you need to let this thing go, you
What
do.
other job
As,
is he trying to get?
that's what she said. She had potential employers
In
and
what industry?
her, and yeah, in the industry. Yeah. But that's
To
what
find
she,
a new industry.
that's what she knew. Again, she has a child.
Find
That's
a
what
new
she,
ind find a new
that is
industry.
so
You
easy
have
for
a
you to say, and
child.
I feel like you're not being empathetic at all. She has a
I
Down
am.
syndrome child that needs to be taken care of. And she's like, this is the industry I know. This is the industry that has enabled me to have the healthcare benefits, whatever, to take care of my child. Yes, I left because I thought this is too much. Surely I can be able to find somewhere else where I
Exactly.
can have whatever. But then she discovered, no, I cannot. And again, I have a child to be taken care of. Now, you can criticize her. Oh, you're not virtuous enough. But I'm saying, well, why, to me, ask these men, you guys as men are the leaders, why aren't you virtuous enough to say, I'm going to take a stand so that our women are not put in these positions to where they are already single parents taking care of a child and then forced to be in these industries to ensure that they can provide for their child. I'm not going to knock someone who is saying, hey, yeah, if I was on my own, I'd walk or whatever, but I have a kid. Who a kid with special needs. And this industry has made it clear that if I go up against this guy, I will not be able to take care of my kid. And that to me, I empathize with that. Now, I'm not saying that if you still took a stand, would I consider you very righteous and virtuous? Yes, I would. But I understand why that is difficult to do.
I
And it's not
understand it.
about money. It is about the fact that you are trying to support your child. I get that. The same with this other assistant. You can say, oh, it's all about the money, whatever. But again, she went in there saying, this is what I want to do. This is the industry I want to be in. I enjoy this industry. It makes me happy. I have a passion for this industry. It's not about the money. But now that I'm in it, I'm getting the credibility. I realize I'm about to be subject or have been subject to rape. And so I don't look at it as, oh, you're some gold digger because you should have just walked away. I look at it as, I empathize that you have to make a hard choice. Now, yes, if it was me, yeah, I can easily say I can walk away, but I'm not in that industry for one. And two, I have a family and a support system that will ensure that I will never be destitute. I can't speak on that for everyone. And so to say that, oh, the rest of the world who can't make that step is just completely unrighteous and gold digging and have no souls, I
I didn't
can't
say
go
that.
that far either.
I
But you're
didn't say
you're
that.
you're going so hard on
Now,
them. I'm like,
let
let's
me
go
explain.
hard
Let me
on
say
these
something.
men
Okay,
who
let me
are
say
not
something.
stepping up and
Okay,
being those leaders so that
let
we
me do
do feel
this then.
comfortable doing that.
Let me say this. I have empathy for people in those situations because I understand that it's a difficult choice to make. You have to make some kind of choice whether or not I'm going to tolerate this and endure so I can pay for my family. There are a lot of people who are sex workers right now. It's like, listen, this is what I have to do in order to make ends meet at the end of the day.
And they're
And so
willing.
they're not
They're
just
willing.
it.
They're willing.
So there's where's your empathy for them? A lot of them
But
find
they're
that
willing.
they're
Hey, if you're willing, this
listen,
then because you're
that's
not claiming rape. I'm
so
having
that's not
empathy for
willing.
the person claiming
That's not
rape.
willing when you have no other choice. I mean, right now you just made the comment that you don't have any other choice at this point because you want to be
I
because
didn't
you
say
love
you didn't
this
have a choice. I
industry.
said it's a difficult choice to make.
Okay,
But
so
to
it's a
me,
difficult
I'm
choice for
still
them to
saying that
make.
she was raped. You're
So
now saying she's some sex worker. And I'm like, no, no,
no,
no.
I'm
She
not saying
was
she
not a
is.
sex worker.
I'm
She
not saying
was
she
raped.
is. So let's not contort my words.
Okay.
I'm saying I'm making a different I'm posing a different scenario where many sex workers are in that field because they feel like they don't have any other choice because they have to pay bills. You go to some of these other countries where they're even poorer countries, and they're like, listen, I don't even have an opportunity for a job. The only way that I can possibly even make money is to indulge these, sex hungry, low esteemed men who want to pay me for this. And as a result, I go home to my husband who knows that I do this type of work, and my children who know that I do this type of work, and my child, my daughter, she's going to grow up and do the same thing. Why? Because they don't see that they have any other options because there's not a lot of employment for them. And so people are in those situations, and I have a lot of empathy for them. But the reality of it is that it boils down to you do have a choice, and you just found one choice a little bit more tolerable than the other choice. One choice is to be homeless with your Down syndrome child. The other choice is to indulge the unwanted attacks and or rape of your employer. It's still a choice. I have empathy for you, but empathy does not excuse your accountability and your role in this situation. The question is yes, you might love this industry, but at this point, if the industry isn't loving you, get out of it and find another job, find another industry. This
You
might
just
be
said
the
you don't have
opportunity
another job.
that God is speaking to you and saying, you are in the wrong place, and I need you
You
to be in
just
the
said
right
you don't have
place.
another job. But I want to hear from the viewers on this. Hopefully, you guys are commenting and whatnot. Because again, if you don't have another job, then you're like you said, it's either homeless with your kid, or you are in an industry that you love, but you're tolerating
The
unlawful.
question I want to know is what other jobs did they look for? They're looking for jobs
I
still still
told
in that.
you that
If you're
she
still
tried
in,
to find
so
another job in that same
in the
industry and could
same
not. In the
in the
same
same
time.
industry, so then you're not left where you're going to be destitute because you can find another job in another industry,
You're
and you
putting
have found
you're
other
putting words in
employment
her
since
mouth.
then.
You're putting words in
Huh?
her mouth. Because just like you said with the sex
I'm
workers,
just saying.
you know,
That's
so
it.
many
That's the
sex
reason why
workers.
I said those are the questions that I want to know.
But that's what you said. You gave the example of the sex workers who have no other job but to do this to put food
That's
in
their
your
perspective.
example.
That's their
So that's
perspective.
what I'm saying. So then the option is, do I not work and my family suffers, or do
Right.
I work? And and
So they
and
make a choice.
yeah, it's a choice. I'm not
Each
disputing
one
it.
of them make a
You're
choice.
making it seem like,
So
oh, well, then
so
you're
these
just
girls
as
that are
bad
on the
as everyone
stage,
else because you had to make this difficult choice. And I'm saying,
these
I
women
am
who
blessed.
testified
You
in
are
the Diddy
blessed.
case, I am.
I'm saying
But they
I'm
had a
blessed,
choice too.
and you are blessed that we've never been put in that position to make those choices. I'm saying we are both blessed in that. And so to some degree chastise or to some degree tell
I'm not
someone, oh,
chastising.
you
Empathy
said
does
you
not
you
excuse
you
behavior,
said
though.
you are accountable as if you are accountable for the fact that he raped
You
you.
are
No, no,
accountable. No, I
no,
didn't say
you're
that. I
not.
didn't say that. I
No,
never
you're
said
not.
that you are accountable for being raped. You are accountable for staying in that situation. You are accountable for staying under his employ. You could have
But
left.
you were
You
still
chose
raped.
not to leave.
Fine.
Okay,
But
fine.
you
You were
were
still
still raped.
right. I get that. I get that.
Okay. I
But
just
you
want to
made
make
a
sure we get
choice. You made a
that.
choice to continue to stay there. And with all the consequences that come along with it, including challenging your level of credibility. Now, let me say this before we run out of time. I do hold those same guys. How can you sit and watch a man, I don't care if he is your boss, just brutally beat a woman? How can you watch somebody do these types of things that Diddy allegedly did to these other women and you stay silent about it? I'm like, I'm gonna say something to you about, bruh. Nah, bruh, we don't need to, don't do that in front of me. I'm sorry. You cannot do that in front of me. Do it again, I'm reporting you. I almost said something else. I'm reporting your
Why not report them
behind.
again?
I'm gonna do it again.
Hey, do
Let it
me like
happen
the mom.
again.
Now let me take some pictures because
Yeah.
let's make sure this is
I'm
documented.
going to do some videotaping or whatever. I'm going to have some evidence at some point, and I'm not going to let it go unaddressed. It's just not going to happen because I cannot compromise my own personal integrity or with my own sense of virtue just because you're offering me money. I can't do that. I'm sorry. That's just me. I can't. And I thank God that I've never been put in that situation where I had to. But if I pray that if I ever have to, I'll make the right choice and be like, listen, I'm just trusting God is going to take care of me because I'm sitting right now on virtue and principle.
Well, I also hope that we can agree if more men did step up and say, no, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm not going to let this be our industry. I'm not going to let, women be raped. And I think it would not only give women a safer cushion to step up or victims in general, because again, we know men suffer this as well. But it also ensures that there are other avenues where they can go so they don't feel like, hey, I have no choice but to continue to endure this. But again, I want to hear what you guys are thinking because where do we go from here, especially if Trump does pardon him? Where are we going to go? Or if he's found not guilty, because that's also an option as well. So where do we go from here? And hopefully next time we'll even talk about AI because that's going to be even more an interesting thing as we continue to talk about entry level jobs and the like. So until next time, next Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Also, make sure you catch us on your favorite podcast platform, as well as a repeat of this episode on Star Radio, as well as K Day Live. Until next Saturday, hope you have a blessed week.